The film starts in a neighborhood surrounded by barbed wires and security cameras. In broad daylight, a thief named Ciro walks into this neighborhood and uses a tennis ball to open the door of a luxury SUV. He then takes out the stereo system, and after putting it inside his bag, he starts looking for some other valuable things. This is when he finds an expensive-looking pair of sunglasses. He's happy with this haul, but before making an escape, he proceeds to pee on the rear seats just for fun. After that, he finally tries to open the door, but to his complete horror, all the doors are locked. He immediately tries to kick down all the windows one by one, but the glass seems impenetrable. Realizing that his kicks won't do the job, he takes out the repair kit and uses a wrench to smash the windows. But once again, the glass panels don't budge, even after multiple blows. Things are looking grim for him, but he doesn't lose hope and starts taking apart one of the doors from the inside. He tries to open the lock but hurts his arm in the process. After finding out that the door is lined with solid steel, he turns his attention toward the floor panel. But after removing the carpet, he once again finds himself staring at solid steel lining. By now, he's pretty much run out of every single option, so he hesitantly takes out his gun and decides to shoot down the windscreen. However, he soon regrets this decision as the bullet gets deflected from the glass and hits him in the leg. He lets out a scream and instantly uses his t-shirt to stop the bleeding. He knows that he's stuck, so he takes out his phone to get help, but right then, a woman stops near the vehicle and uses one of the windows to check her makeup. He tries to ask her for help, but it's clear that she can't see him through the window. After she leaves, he once again tries to call for help, but before he can even send a text, the phone runs out of batteries and dies. After cursing his luck, he drinks all the soda he brought with him and decides to wait for someone to find him. That night, he experiences excruciating pain, but somehow manages to fall asleep. He wakes up to see that he has run out of soda. Luckily, there is some condensation on the window and he uses it to quench his thirst. He then installs the stereo system back into the vehicle and starts playing some music on the radio to distract himself. He's singing along to one of the songs when the gravity of the situation hits him, and he goes back to smashing the door from the inside. He's hammering it when suddenly the screen shows an incoming call. He's hesitant to pick it up, but he has no choice, so he answers it. The man on the other end of the line introduces himself as Dr. Enrique. He says that he owns this SUV, and Ciro is the 29th person who has ever tried to rob him. He explains that whenever someone opens the door to his SUV, he gets a notification on his phone and he uses the phone to lock the car. He says that the car is completely bulletproof and soundproof, so no one will hear him. It also has polarized windows, so it's impossible to see him from the outside. However, if Ciro really wanted to end his suffering, he can just shoot the fuel tank, which isn't bulletproof and has enough fuel to cause a huge explosion. After making it clear that Ciro isn't going anywhere without his permission, Enrique tells him that he's 60 years old and a widower. He then asks Ciro what he would do if he saw his son stealing. Ciro doesn't understand the question, and he is in no mood to answer it. Instead, he tells Enrique to let him go because he's extremely thirsty and is suffering from the heat inside this vehicle. Enrique doesn't care about his rant and ends the call. However, Ciro is relieved when the air conditioning gets turned on. He's enjoying this respite from the hot weather when suddenly the fans go up to the maximum and the temperature drops really low. He tries to control the air conditioning, but he's unable to do so, and pretty soon he starts freezing. He uses floor mats to cover some of the vents while shoving paper inside the others, but nothing is working. He's about to pass out under some bloody mats when suddenly the air conditioning gets turned off and he receives another call from Enrique. Enrique once again asks him what he would do if he saw his son stealing, and this time Ciro says that he will take him to the police. Enrique doesn't like his answer and instead tells him a story about how some robbers traumatized his daughter and his grandson last year and forced them to leave that city for good. Ciro doesn't care about the story and asks what kind of doctor he is, but Enrique ends the call after saying Ciro should figure out the answer himself. The next morning, Ciro is using the seatbelt to work out his muscles when a police cruiser stops in front of his SUV. The officer walks around his vehicle and Ciro tries his best to get his attention, but it's useless and the cop leaves after writing a ticket for bad parking. Later that day, it starts raining and Ciro is daydreaming about drinking the rainwater when Enrique calls him once again. He asks Ciro to give up his full name and ID number if he wants water, and with a shaky voice, Ciro gives him all the information. After that, Enrique informs him that he can get water from the hose behind the back seat. These words are like music to Ciro's ears, and he immediately finds the hose. He fills his bottle with a bluish liquid and drinks all of it in one go. That night, he watches as a guy delivers pizza to the house next door. Ciro's hungry too, but he can only watch with envious eyes. The next morning, he is once again trying to break the door but isn't feeling too well. During his next conversation with Enrique, he tells him that he's hurt and also has a fever. Enrique asks him to explain what the gunshot wound looks like, and after listening to Ciro's explanation, Enrique believes that it's infected. He turns the heating on to keep Ciro warm as he explains that today he found out that he has only one more year to live, but he's not sad about it. He then starts rambling on about all the times he was robbed, but Ciro can't even hear what he's saying because he's struggling with all the heat inside the vehicle. After rambling for more than half an hour, Enrique finally ends the call and also turns off the heating, which provides some relief to Ciro. Later that day, he's reading a manual to find a way to escape this situation when he decides to take out a page and eat it. Tears well up in his eyes as he considers what he's doing to survive. At this point, he decides to improve his situation, so he starts placing stickers all over the car and even uses some crayons to paint on some of the seats. When he gets thirsty again, he tries to drink his own pee. He doesn't want to do it but has no choice, so he drinks it all while trying not to vomit. Later on, he is playing with a tennis ball when suddenly a guy tries to break into the car. But before he can even open the door, some people from the neighborhood grab him and start beating him up. The thief is eventually handed over to the police, and once again, Ciro's hopes of getting out are crushed. That night, he doesn't pick up Enrique's calls and instead grabs the cricket and tries to eat it. However, this little insect is his only companion in this hell, so he decides to keep it alive for company. That night, a couple is making love right next to one of the windows, but Ciro ignores them and instead starts talking to the cricket about how he steals from the rich just like his father and his grandfather used to do. The next morning, he wakes up when Enrique calls him. He begs for mercy, but Enrique has no intention of ever letting him leave. However, he tells Ciro about chocolate that's hidden inside the car, and Ciro immediately grabs it and starts eating it like an animal. After this small meal, he's feeling good and spends the afternoon charging his phone's battery in the sun and spying on people in the neighborhood. He then goes back to breaking the door and somehow manages to put a small hole through it. He tries to call for help, but no one can hear him because the opening is too small and he's unable to shout louder due to his deteriorating health. He's sitting in the driver's seat feeling defeated when Enrique calls him to explain that he met Ciro's wife and son and gave them $100,000, saying that Ciro won that money through a lottery. He says that Ciro doesn't deserve such a good family because he has committed horrible crimes. He starts listing all the people that Ciro has killed or hurt over the years, but Ciro says that he was a child and he has paid the price for his actions. After Enrique ends the call, Ciro puts the battery back in his phone and luckily it turns on. He calls his wife, but she doesn't pick up, so he tries to leave a message for her and his son. His luck, however, runs out because the phone dies once again. At night, Ciro lets the cricket leave the car through that hole. He then starts pushing the ignition button again and again, and by some miracle, the vehicle starts up. He tries to drive away, but the gear is stuck in reverse, so he steps on the gas and rams the back of the SUV into a pole. The impact shatters the rear window, and Ciro uses it to get out of the vehicle. He walks away from the scene and gets to a nearby convenience store. There, he grabs a water bottle and a couple of burgers and starts enjoying arguably the best meal of his life. He's still eating when a security guard comes up to him and asks him to pay for the food, but Ciro just shoots him down without hesitation. The chaos forces him to wake up and he realizes that he was just having a dream. He's pretty much lost all hope, so he decides to end his life, but just then Enrique calls him once again. He tells Enrique to let him go or he will shoot himself, but Enrique says he can never leave. After hearing this, Ciro puts the gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger, but the bullet gets stuck. He starts crying, thinking that he can't even end his own life, but Enrique asks him to pay attention to the front of the car. Right then, headlights come on and Ciro can see Enrique standing in front of the vehicle. The bald man opens the driver's side door and after spraying the interior with a deodorant, he takes the seat right next to Ciro. He has brought a blunt for Ciro alongside some peanuts. He even fixes Ciro's gun before cleaning the wound on his leg. Ciro's too weak to even move, so he watches as Enrique starts talking to one of his patients who is going into labor. He thinks it might be his last chance, so he grabs the gun and takes a shot at Enrique, but misses. Still, it allows him to leave the car and he starts ringing the doorbells of the nearby houses and even fires a few more shots to get someone's attention. He succeeds as a female police officer gets there just as Enrique starts dragging him back to the SUV. Enrique tells the officer that he's not going to surrender, and this leads to a standoff where dozens of people surround the two of them alongside reporters from multiple news channels who are broadcasting every second of this strange situation. Enrique is asking people to vote on whether they want Ciro to live or not, while the officers are trying to negotiate with him. The police eventually bring a retired negotiator named Julio to the scene, and he immediately starts talking to Enrique to solve the situation. He notices that Enrique is being encouraged by some of the local people who are tired of these criminals and want Ciro to die. To change that dynamic, he agrees to bring some water for Enrique and Ciro. Enrique is also happy with this idea, and he allows a female officer to bring a water bottle up to him. After the two of them are done drinking, Julio walks up to Enrique and tells him the story of how his father left his family when he was just a kid. And after a while, he watched as his father got run over by a car right in front of his house. He then goes on to explain that he has no family left, so he's not worried about dying, just like Enrique. He says that he also gets mad at these criminals, but he knows that killing them in front of hundreds of people is not the solution. He even mentions how Enrique's daughter will feel terrible after learning that her dad killed someone in front of all these cameras. This thought hits Enrique hard, and he finally releases Ciro from his grip. As officers take Ciro into custody, Enrique slowly slides back into his car. Julio is asking him to surrender, but he just opens the window to put his cell phone on top of the vehicle. There's a timer running on the phone, and Julio realizes that something bad is about to happen. He asks everyone to move back, and just then, a giant explosion rocks the entire neighborhood. Everyone is shocked at how this whole situation wrapped up. The film ends with Ciro looking at all the chaos from inside a police cruiser as he's being taken away. If you enjoyed that recap, I got a good feeling you'll enjoy this one too. Click on the video on your screen for more.